Well, welcome to the annual Legacy Giving event. Thank you for coming. This event is jointly sponsored by UUC and the UUC Endowment Foundation, Inc., a support organization for UUC. I'm Bob Busing, Chair of the Endowment Foundation Board. With me is Barbara Brandt, the Vice President of the UUC Board of Trustees. Our plan is to help you understand better the three ways to provide a legacy gift and the different ways you can accomplish this goal through the endowment, through UUC, or through a restricted gift to UUC for capital expenses. Barbara?
I'm Barbara Brandt. As Bob said, I'm Vice President of the Board of Trustees at UUC. As we will explain, legacy giving is not just for the endowment. It also helps sustain the ministry of UUC and can fund major capital projects. Our goal is to provide a menu of choices for the donors so that each person can find the method that matches their style and their circumstances. Bob will provide an overview of the most common ways to do this. Many of them are surprisingly easy. We look forward to him giving this overview.
But first, we have a chalice lighting and some opening words from Reverend Roberta.
Thank you. So when I was watching the check presentation yesterday, I was thinking that in this season of miracles, that is a bit of a miracle that people have created this way of being able to continue to give to this congregation long after they have departed. And someone was telling me today that the last time they remembered a check presentation, it was much less money than this one. So the miracle continues to grow. And so I chose for our opening and chalice lighting this reading by Gwen Matthews called "You Are the Holiday Miracle." As December opens before us, we welcome in the gift of reflection. We turn toward our holiday celebrations and search for common threads of meaning. We begin with Yule, the winter solstice, and we are invited to explore duality, cycles, and seasons, and to witness the Holly King being overcome by the Oak King. Yule reminds us that we all partake in the miracle of renewal. Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, commemorates a time of miracles when the faith of the Jewish people sustained them to reclaim their holy temple and keep the light of the menorah burning for 8 days. Christmas, the celebration of Jesus' humble birth in a manger, offers us the chance to revisit the miracle of birth and the desire to find saviors to heal the scars of humanity. Here in our congregation, every one of you are just as much a holiday miracle as the turning of the earth, as persistence and dedication to a faith, as the creation of each new life. We see the love you give to others, the space you create to hold one another's joys and sorrows, and the generosity and spirit you entrust to this community. You are the holiday miracles. This community is a community of miracle makers.
Thank you. Well, first I'm going to take a couple minutes to explain the Endowment Foundation, and then Barbara will take a couple minutes to talk about UUC's programs and activities, because there are people who aren't aware of it. So we're going to take a minute to talk about it. The Endowment Foundation was established in the 1980s as a way to help support UUC's programs in perpetuity. Many of you are familiar with university endowments, and those are just considered one way to support the cause. All support is good. The only bad choice is no support. But this way happens to appeal to those donors who like to leave a permanent impact. The endowment has grown through donations and managed investment returns, and now accounts for 10 to 15% of the total UUC budget. And most of the funds in the endowment came from members who have now passed away, but they left this powerful legacy to establish the values that they believed in. We have an excellent website at uuclearwaterfoundation.org, uuclearwaterfoundation.org, and you're welcome to look at that and see the list of the names of the donors and learn more about the Endowment Foundation. Barbara?
UUC first became an official fellowship of the UUA on June 13th, 1951, when 15 people pledged to serve mankind. Since that day, UUC has continued to serve its members and the wider community in meaningful ways that give powerful reasons for UUC to even exist and to deserve our financial support. Based on the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, we have affirmed the worth and dignity of all persons, in part through our membership in FAST. Working with 40 other religious organizations, we have made a positive difference in the availability of affordable housing and criminal justice reforms in Tampa Bay, in Pinellas County, We were also among the groups that supported Susan Stanton, the Largo city manager who was fired after she disclosed that she was transgender. We are a welcoming congregation that fully supports the LGBTQ+ community, and the banner on our outside wall proudly proclaims that Black Lives Matter, and we fully embrace that movement. We have practiced justice, equity, and compassion in human relations through our care circle and pastoral associates who reach out to members in need. Maybe it's a trip to the doctor, maybe it's a trip to the grocery store, or religious or spiritual sustenance in times of illness. Most recently, a group of UUC congregants held a water communion ritual for Susan Hegner as she neared the end of her life. There's also a minister's discretionary fund for members in dire need of financial help. We have encouraged spiritual growth through a wide range of topics and challenging sermons in our Sunday worship, as well as programs such as spiritual potpourri and meditation. We regularly invite members to share their stories, as Ruth Samuels and Rachel Stone and Michael Kahn did about a week ago, so we can learn from each other. We recognize that spiritual growth takes many forms and comes from many sources, including music and art. So we do emphasize those as well as the written and spoken word. We have promoted a free and responsible search for truth and meaning through our workshops and programs, ranging from a discussion of the 5 smooth zones of liberal religion to talks by noted humanists. We have Open Issues, a weekly discussion group covering topics of current concern, as well as an active lifelong learning program that spans all ages and stages. The work underway on the 8th principle calls on all of us to examine our own assumptions and biases and explore how individually and collectively we can bring more justice to our world and to our community. We back the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process every time we have a board meeting or a congregational meeting. In the community, we played a very important role in the passage of Amendment 4, which was the right of felons to have the vote restored. We hosted UUA President Susan Frederick Gray and had a phone bank on this issue in 2018. We pursue the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, in part through many of our social justice initiatives, including monthly financial support for a nonprofit organization in the community, connections with the Hispanic community, we participate in campaigns to better the conditions of the farm workers, of communities of people of color, and outreach to refugees. We have welcomed and supported families from Iraq, and we are currently waiting for a family from Afghanistan. We respect the interdependent web of which we are all a part through the stewardship of the Beacon Garden and the food forest, honoring the Native American Tocobaga on whose land we sit. We also strive to practice environmentally responsible activities such as recycling and the careful use of resources. Through legacy giving, you can help sustain these very many important activities and the welfare of your fellow congregants. I would like to acknowledge Margie Manning, our board president, who contributed most of the information for this presentation. Thanks, Margie.
Mary Curry would like to take a moment to talk about how UUC has supported her.
Yes, it's been, I've been here 11 years now, and my husband passed away last year. But 11 years ago, he and I spotted UUC from when we were in Sacramento, California, and knew we were moving to Florida. And we wanted to have a large congregation of UUs, and this is the largest congregation we've ever been involved in. And it's been comforting and intellectually stimulating to us. And he and I have left in our will a gift to the congregation, to the UUC congregation. And it means a lot to me. It means a lot. This past year has meant a lot to our daughters. We have 5 daughters between the 2 of us. They're all adults. But it was comforting and reassuring to them as he was passing, and how I can proceed on with my life after his passing. And it means a lot to us. And we put UUC in our will. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Well, I'm going to take a few minutes to explain what legacy giving is. We've been talking about it in general terms, but I'm going to explain it in more detail. And I want to be clear that you do not need to have a lawyer to do much of this, because people sometimes think legacy giving is only for wills that require a lawyer to prepare, but it turns out that's not the case. So let me go through some of the different ways that legacy gifts can be shaped. And I'm going to start with kind of the easiest and work my way toward the more complex. So first of all, bank accounts can have a transfer on death or a pay on death, TOD, POD. That's a simple form that's filled out at the bank. It doesn't require a will. It's just something that you can take care of at any point. When you set up any brokerage accounts, you may not remember, but you signed a beneficiary form. And one of the common mistakes people make is they never update those forms. And so another way to do this without retaining a lawyer is to ask your brokerage firm to send you a beneficiary form and get that updated and include UUC in that. By the way, you can do this a lot of different ways. You can say you have a beneficiary who's a family member, but you have a contingent beneficiary that's UUC. You can have a percentage to one direction and another percentage to another direction. You are not restricted in those sorts of documents to a single recipient of the money. The same is true as brokerage accounts for 401ks, IRAs, and those types of savings accounts. Again, a simple change to a beneficiary form can accomplish the goal. Then there's life insurance. Life insurance, a paid up life insurance has value. And you can establish the beneficiary or contingent beneficiary of a life insurance policy as UUC or the UUC Endowment Foundation. Next is a donor advised fund at a community foundation. If you have set up such a fund, and as you know, you are entitled to draw down on it for your charitable giving, but there is a beneficiary form to designate what happens to the money that you have not yet dispersed from that fund. And of course, UUC or the Endowment Foundation would love to be considered for that. Next is real estate. In the history of this endowment, we actually have had substantial pieces of real estate donated to the endowment, which the board then sold and liquidated and put those proceeds into the endowment. but that's certainly another thing that can be considered if you want to make that kind of legacy gift. So now let's talk about wills. And of course, I think if you don't have a will, it's my duty to advise you that I think you should have one. And we, of course, would love to have you name UUC or the UUC Endowment Foundation in your will, but there's a couple different ways to do that. A common method is to take your estate and assign it in percentages to either family members or good causes or your university or your religious home. And that way, no matter how the value of the estate goes up or down, you've got the gifts in proportion to your intention. Another way is to do specific dollar amounts. And I will tell you, I personally do that method because I commit to adjusting my estate documents every 3 years. And when you do that process, you end up finding out some things that need to be changed. New grandchildren might appear, for example, or your interests in different causes might adjust. So in my case, I monitor it that way. And then the third way is residue. And residue means if you have money assigned in specific dollar amounts to people and causes and organizations, but there's a residue after left over that you can also assign through your will the residue to UUC or the Endowment Foundation. So to whom do you designate? Well, I want to be clear on something that it's very important that your intention be very clear, that you take the time to get exactly down what it is you're intending to do. That means getting the correct name of UUC or the correct name of UUC Endowment Foundation, Inc. And make sure that, that there's no confusion, because everybody wants to meet your intention, but it's hard when it's not clear. Well, there are 3 ways that the UUC organizations have established for legacy giving. And this depends on your donation style or your goals. The first one is an unrestricted donation to UUC. The Board of Trustees, that Margie and Barbara are now heading, would accept this unrestricted bequest, and it would be up to the board to decide where it's best used to promote the mission of UUC. But the second way is by decision of that board, they've agreed that they would accept a capital restricted bequest. So if you may remember the Surtee Social Hall project, where there was money raised for that specific capital project, the board has agreed that they would accept a capital restricted bequest, which would be then used only for building projects and for capital projects. And then the third way is the one that's relevant to my role on the Endowment Foundation, and that is to make a bequest to the UUC Endowment Foundation, which the intent, of course, is it creates a permanent endowment for the benefit of UUC and in perpetuity. This, as I mentioned earlier, is attractive to some donors. That's something they really like. And I do encourage you to look at the list of donors who have already donated to the endowment, and you can see many people you've known over the years. Now, I will tell you, my personal decision was to leave money both unrestricted to UUC in my will. And by the way, I'm feeling very healthy, so don't spend it yet, Margie. And UUCEF, so that I would both support immediate needs, but I would also support the in perpetuity support for UUC forever. There's no magic words to be used as long as you're clear, The web pages include the federal tax ID number. Some estate planning lawyers would like to see that, so they can be, they're very cautious, many of them, and they want to be very precise. So that's on our web page. You can look at that. And of course, Barbara and I are willing to meet with you in person to talk about any of your interests and, you know, go over your specific situation. But I have one other comment, and this one is just personal advice. It's hard to sit down and take your estate and try to assign it out with precision. It requires you to face up to the fact that you might just not live forever. And it also, it's hard to be precise. So what I've recommended is that you channel your inner impressionist painter. The impressionists weren't trying to do a photograph of that beautiful building or that stack of grain. They were trying to create the impression that itself communicated the importance of that painting. And when I got stuck in this process, that helped me a lot. Don't beat yourself up on trying to be precise down to the penny. Create the impression that speaks to your values and the organizations you wish to support, and hopefully that includes your church home, so that you can come close enough. Because it's much better to get this in place and be close enough than to stumble on the unrealistic goal of being 100% precisely accurate. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We don't want to, this is very personal stuff, and we don't want to have a group discussion, but you can reach out to me or Barbara or Margie, and we will be glad to talk about your circumstance. So Barbara, any closing words?
Sure. You've just said some of them too. So what I just repeat that anyone would, is welcome to reach out to either Bob or I or Margie. And we know that these decisions are very personal, but we would like to talk with you personally to learn what you want to accomplish, and maybe we can help you establish some of your goals. On behalf of the UUC Board of Trustees, I want to thank you for taking the time to learn more about these important ways to support UUC, either through the endowment or directly to UUC.
And on behalf of the Endowment Foundation, thank you for learning more and considering your legacy here at UUC. Thank you all.